In this video, I want to share with you a few insights that can hopefully expand and empower the way in which you understand and relate to healing. Because the options that are commonly and readily available are really not very potent, not very effective, not very empowering, and usually often just cause more strain, more struggle, and more stress than they necessarily even resolve. Because most of the time, things are really operating at the level of complexity rather than addressing the real simplicity of what we are doing. So first thing that we really need to understand and have some approach with is that we are all deeply conditioned and have been. And one of the primary ideas that really shows up and is relevant to this context is that we believe there is some successful place that we can get to, some peak of the mountain, some ideal state, and subsequently some kind of normality that everything is compared to. Some sort of just objective measure that is the one true measure, and that's what we should be, and that's what we should be like, and that's how we should look at ourselves. The reality of the situation is, here in the world of things, the real world, maybe if you want to call it that, meaning not your imagination, that's not really a thing. It's not really ever been discovered a baseline thing of normality. In actuality, just a tangent, a few years ago I was putting together a presentation called basically like why you should never want to be normal. Just because I wanted to make fun of this idea but also empower people to just be more weird or be more who of what they are, because I wanted to demonstrate what normal actually was. So what I did was I hired someone to do a bunch of research on a few different metrics, happiness, the amount of people on psychiatric drugs, the amount of people getting divorced, the amount of people, that are actually healthy, all of these different metrics, and trying to find out, well, what is actually normal in modern America right now? And what all of that research really showed was actually extremely disheartening, and that's why I never actually made the video, because what it showed is extreme unhappiness, extreme medication, a lot of disease, and just really nothing very good or happy or positive at all. So I completely abandoned that. So that was just one exploration of looking at what normal is. So just bringing that up and illustrating that story just to show how absurd and silly that idea is, and how these baseline conditionings that are in all of our heads, because it is the fabric of which our world functions, from the religious institutions, the scientific kind of institutions, as well as obviously marketing and sales, and that whole engine which drives the entertainment industry and the consumer industry that is most of America in many ways. So we have to understand that these are driving forces that show up in our whatever healing we are trying to do or interested in. But the thing is that all of those things we've just understood aren't really real and are completely disempowering by design, by default, by definition, by the nature of what they are. So we're going to try to take these constructs and then layer on some sort of vague understanding of traditional or holistic healing or ancient healing, and some vague, half-baked, compartmentalized, piecemeal understanding of spirituality, layer all these things together, and then imagine that that is going to somehow do anything for us, really. When in reality, most of the time what people are doing is just relabeling their stuff under new, hipper, more whatever labels. And really, that's obviously a necessary part of the process, and that's maybe where people are at. We're all in different places. Again, it's totally fine. All I'm saying is that it's kind of dishonest. You're kind of lying to yourself. You're lying to other people. And your whole existence is just a big contradiction that is kind of stressful and anxiety producing by its nature. And for example, it's like, let's say your foundational way of looking at the world is fundamentally, monotheistic Christian in a large sense. But then you're not really ever going to look at that or acknowledge that or even understand what that is or what that means. But you're going to flip around and be like, oh, well, like, I'm just really open-minded and like I'm spiritual and I'm just on a spiritual quest, a healing quest, and I'm just like an urban shaman and I'm all of these things. But your fundamental approach is still salvational, hierarchical, based on some belief in objective causality and some higher power and some idea of original sin or some idea of evil that you have to get rid of or some idea that you have to save the world or that the world needs saving. And all of these things which fundamentally go back to this thing here, but you're trying to say that you're this other thing which is different or an alternative or better than or something when it really isn't. It's just a different outfit on the same things. Which, again, to be clear, nothing wrong with any of that if that's what a person chooses to do. The fact of the matter is it's just not true. It's just actually a lie to yourself and to other people, and it's wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy. And it's not really going to be ever very effective. Because it's just kind of driving the car with your foot on the brake and the accelerator. Yeah, you can definitely do it. You have the free rein to do it, but it might not really be that useful. So now, getting to the meat of what I'm trying to lead us up to with these other understandings, is that, for example, to really make this practical or grounded, we could say, yeah, this is a really common thing people get really into, like, oh, intimacy issues or issues in relationships, right? Like, super common, extremely common, like, it's a thing, definitely. And especially once you get more into new agey spiritual personal development realms, it becomes more of a thing because our brain gets just more full of theories and ideas and different things. So one way we could look at this is say, okay, well, this person has these issues because from their childhood these things happened. And then when they were this old, this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and this thing happened, which that only happened because these things happened, and then these things happened, but then these things happened, and these people were like this because of that. And then it's can be classified and codified as these different types of issues, but it also could be these different kinds of issues. But then you talk to your psychologist about it, your psychiatrist about it, your shaman about it, your healer about it, your acupuncturist about it, body worker about it, a psychic about it, tarot about it, you do intuitive dream journaling about it, chakras, and then you do all of these different things and all of this complexity and all of these things we're studying, and then basically what you end up developing is this simple thing that then has this huge like dump truck full of information and idea and theory and hypothesis and conjecture and hyperbole and imagination and complexity just layered on top of it. And then it seems insurmountable. It seems like, oh, it's like a whole thing. And I only, to contextually provide why I mention that is because being in this world, I write for various websites. I've been teaching for 6+ years, doing videos like this, doing consultations, doing one-on-one things, fielding lots of emails and questions, and also just going to events, going to conferences, being a parts of different systems, trying to learn different modalities. I just see these things. It's extremely common and extremely predominant. And I'm really just trying to get back to the simplicity, the actual reasons, the dynamics, really, the living things. So getting back to our example, that's really one way one person can understand it, is go through all of this analysis, all of this investment, and do all these different things and develop all of these stories around it and try to rearrange it in so many different ways. And what ends up happening is we define things for ourselves, goals for ourselves, that are based in ideas that are completely unfounded, like I said earlier, meaning the idea that there's some great place to get to that will somehow be better than the other. And then the other is that somehow there's some normality that we are being compared against, and somehow we're not something or other enough compared to that. So how that shows up is, we develop ideas, all different issues. Right now I'm just really working on my self-love issues. I'm just really into self-love. It's like, well, are you aware that self-love just also implies self-hate? And the only reason that you have to practice or do self-love is because you are defining yourself as someone who hates yourself, but you're not aware of and or willing to accept the fact that you do that. So you're just perpetuating the same cycle, the same behaviors, the same way of looking at yourself and the world, but just the other side of the coin, which is only going to last so long and will eventually lead back to the root, because you're still just operating from that same root. Because it is just more of the complexity. Because it's believing all of the nonsense, all of the illusion, all of the imagination, all of the complexity, that somehow I am this person, I am this separate individual person. Life really is based on causality, and what happened there really did cause me and break me and make me these ways. And then now I have this other issue, which is somehow objective, separate to me, but also is me, but also isn't me, but I am it, but I am not it, but I'm higher than it, but I'm greater than it, but it is also me. It just is a lot of psychobabble when you really start to actually unpack it and really get into what we mean, what we say, and what that actually is. Because none of these things are actually really, really things. So to illustrate more of what I mean, and another approach, which is what I'm trying to get us to, is we could say, okay, I have this issue, right? This intimacy issue, okay? But maybe in reality, all it is just you have a certain style. Maybe you have a certain way of doing things. Maybe you have certain needs. Maybe you are so detached and lacking intimacy with who and what you actually are, because you're so knee-deep in illusion and delusion and imagination and struggle that you don't even have any real idea what you are. Then obviously when you show up in a relationship or try to be intimate, what are you being intimate with? Because if you look at the word intimacy, into me you see. Well, what are you seeing? What are you seeing into? When you look, what do you see? And do you even look? Can you even just objectively and honestly look and say, oh yeah, that's there. Oh my God, I'm sad. What do I do? Nothing. Like, for example, in the QA I did the other day, someone was like, oh, I'm in my early 20s, but I have this fear about the future and I'm worried. I'm like, what should I do? Nothing. That's perfectly normal response to your life. To have a sense of whoa, what's the future going to be? I don't know. That's a little bit scary. That's kind of normal. That's what we do, because the unknown is a little bit scary, but that's also kind of what makes it the unknown and what makes it a bit interesting and intriguing and exciting. And that's kind of part of life, just normal. So you don't have to do anything or try to fix it. And there obviously are practical things you can do as far as, well, what are you interested in doing? What are you excited about? What do you want to do? That's different questions you could ask from a practical basis. That's kind of a different thing. Getting more back to our point is we basically start defining things and goals for ourselves that are completely unattainable because they're not actually real things, that are just reinforcing the thing that we're trying to get away from. So we could, instead of all of the complexity, all of the baggage, all of the chatter, all of the hamster wheel, which again I want to point out and illustrate has value because we have totally no understanding of our life, then we don't have any real understanding. But it's really learning how to perhaps see things, but also just not really be that impressed and really regard them as rather irrelevant and really seeing them for what they are, which is one of the major points that I'm trying to get to, is that most of the time all we really need to do is see things for what they really are. For example, which is the point I'm fucking trying to get to, is just that we can say all of the complexity of, oh, we have this and we have that because of this, because of that, or we can just get really down to it and the things that I've already listed. Oh, well, maybe I have certain needs that I don't really know about. Maybe I have a certain style, way of doing things that just works for me. Maybe I just need things in a certain way or have different desires for different things or different amounts of things. Okay, that's important. But really getting really down to it, maybe it comes down to something as simple as, well, I just, I don't really feel like comfortable in this situation. Okay. And sure, maybe you could describe that and write a thesis dissertation about all of the reasons why, but what's more useful to say, oh, well, actually just in A, B situation, I feel this way. Oh, okay, well, how can I feel a bit more comfortable? And then, oh, well, that's like a different question. That's a different, way more simple and direct than all of the complexity and all of the abstraction. And then all it's just a different question. Okay, so for example, for me, I used to feel really uncomfortable socializing, like being out in public and like going to school, going to college, all those things. And at that point in my life, I just didn't really feel very comfortable or outgoing or able to really relate with people that much. So I just realized, like, oh yeah, well, basically what it is like when I'm here, I feel in my body this state of like comfort. I feel fine. Or I was doing a lot of yoga at the time, so I'm like, oh, I'm laying on the floor in corpse pose, and I feel really great. Oh, but then in this other situation that I'm having all this crazy reaction to and making up all these stories about, I also just, I don't feel this comfort. I was like, oh, well, what if I just felt more of this feeling in that situation? And then over time, those things really weren't issues. I was able to give lots of public talks and events and do all of these things, and my jobs were at the time where like I was a barista and I also worked at a juice bar, so I was face to face with people all the time, and it became really a non-thing. But it was really, that's a simple shift, which yes, it sounds simple, but doesn't necessarily feel simple, but in practice can be simple. And that's really the larger point of what I'm trying to get at, is that most of what people are offering and selling and doing and living and believing is way up here and over here in the complexity and the illusion, in the imagination and the stress and the anxiety, because it's all up here. It's all just in the brain, because fundamentally what we believe that we are as human beings is really completely incorrect and actually contradicts our real experience as human beings and the experience most of us had up until a certain age, where this other part of us, kind of took over because it had to, because otherwise how are we going to, live in the world and be successful and whatever. But really trying to come back to this simple thing and asking those different questions, different approaches. So it's like, oh, well, in this situation, I usually feel this way. Okay, well, what can I do to feel more comfortable? Well, if you have a partner, you can say, oh, well, why don't we just like do these things because that makes me feel more comfortable. Have a good conversation. Be all open and honest with each other. Share things. Touch each other in a certain way for a little while, and then we feel better. Take a salt bath. Do yoga. Exercise. whatever it takes for us, depending on the situation. People have different things. So that in combination with understanding that maybe we have a different style, maybe we have different needs, maybe we have different desires, approaches, maybe we are just like who we are. Now, obviously within all of these things, it's a spectrum. If our behaviors are destructive and harmful to ourselves and or other people, that's a completely different subject, which probably does require more drastic intervention. If we have pretty significant and legitimate diseases or imbalances that are really undermining our life, then yeah, we're going to need more intense help. Not just watching YouTube videos, not just trying to self-medicate. We're going to need people to help us with that. And that's also a very important and can be a useful thing depending on the practitioner and or the modality. But really what I'm trying to get at, and what I've been trying to get at for the last 20 minutes, is just a different way of approaching it, a different way of looking at a different mindset, and actually getting back to the core of the understanding, which for some people might make sense, other people might make no sense at all, because what I'm trying to say is perhaps it's, I don't know, it can be hard to imagine, I suppose, if you're used to just only imagining things, but it's really just trying to make things a bit more simple and understanding that life can be that way and that our actual experience is that way. Like, we could say, oh, well, there's a feeling, but then there's like me feeling it, but then I think it's all of these things, but then it reminds me of these 27 things, and I am this kind of person, I thought I was this kind of way, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. Or there's just the feeling. There's not really a person, there's not really all of the stories, there's not really all the other things, there's just the feeling. That's pretty much what's happening, and that's what's real within the situation. So we could respond to that, we could be in touch with that, or the other thing. But also I have to really realize that both are probably going to happen and occur at the same time, and that's fine too. Because the one thing you can really trust modern people to do is to be extremely extreme about things, is to either be completely apathetic or hyper-aggressive to the point where they're just exhausting themselves yet again. So people will hear stuff like that and go to the, oh, it's just all about feelings. I'm just all about my feelings now. I don't care about any of this other stuff. It's like, no, it's like, it's again trying to understand things for what they are, which just is contingent upon observing. If you just observe these things and watch and see how things play out, you can be informed by your own experience and see things for what they are, which is far more empowering and educational than, many other things. But it's also having resources to help you feel better, to basically really just taking care of yourself, which you can call that self-love, but in my opinion, that's just extreme. That's, again, more of the extremism that I just mentioned. And it's also just reinforcing a lot of an unnecessary baggage and pressure. It's really just actually, being human. Because naturally what we do is what is good for us and what feels good for our bodies. We get tired, we sleep, we feel pressure in our bladder, we pee. Like, that's just what we do. That's our organism, That's not anything. It's just what we are. But it's just we're so distorted that we think, oh, well, eating things that actually make you feel good and doing things that actually feel good to you and taking care of yourself and, respecting yourself and treating yourself with integrity, that's a high human accomplishment. It's like, no, that just shows us how completely awful our culture is. That, like, the most baseline, introductory, basic level of being a human being is actually considered advanced. Like, and even then, like I'm saying, most of the time people take it to extreme. and put it on a pedestal, or make it their lifestyle or their religion, and to get puritanical about it, when that's just completely unrealistic. Or it's like, oh, I have to have a perfect diet, a perfect lifestyle, perfect everything, which again is just more of the same incorrect, unreal things that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which is not going to work. It's just going to cause more disease. It's like, oh, well, your imbalance just latched on to another like expression of itself. It's just now it looks more socially appropriate and cool. It's healthy. Which, to go even deeper, which I'll say, you can turn off the video now if you don't want to go deeper into it on a larger scale, because it's what I'm about to do. It's what I'm into. Which to me, it isn't deeper, it isn't larger scale, it isn't heavier, it's just normal. It's good for me. Like what I was saying earlier, people have different needs, people have different appetites. Well, for me, all of this kind of shit is just extremely casual and light. It's really not heavy for the most part. It doesn't bother me. But for a lot of people, it's not so good. It's not that heavy. Or it is heavy. And especially what I'm about to get into can really make people uncomfortable and put them to sleep. I mean, literally, I can have conversations with people and watch their whole physiology reacting to what I'm saying. Like, it's crazy. It's funny. Anyway, so really getting down to the larger aspect of it, it's basically that our modern world is so sick. It's diseased. It's at its core psychotic and schizophrenic. And I wrote an article and have been working on an article. Actually, it's way longer than an article at this point. But really, no one wanted to publish it because it was a bit much for people to get their heads around. So what I mean by schizophrenic and psychotic, and the reason why I'm saying this is because we can't be surprised when people are sick. We can't be surprised when people are completely lost and out of touch in their life. We cannot be surprised that these things are happening and showing up in our own lives and collectively. We cannot be surprised because what it's all running on is itself diseased, sick, psychotic, and schizophrenic. So it's designed by default for those things to happen. It's just like you wouldn't go out in a rainstorm and be upset that you got wet, because you understand, you have observed that the nature of rain is that you will get wet. You have observed that putting your hand on a hot stove or over a fire with a certain distance, depending on the heat, and a lot of complex analysis that you have just done, because you can get your hand close to a fire and you can dance and get on the edge, and depending on what it is, you've figured out this spectrum of adaptability and intelligence. Same thing with many other natural elements in the world. We have this understanding. So we can't not be surprised that the nature of the basic foundational beliefs and understandings of our world are these things. We cannot be surprised that by their nature, they produce certain things. Which basically, what I'm saying is our fundamental belief system is telling us that, number one, we are separate from the natural world. We are separate from the world we live in, and we are somehow separate individuals from each other. We have this objective I-ness, this permanent self that is somehow separate. Which usually with that, there's the idea that we are here on probation. We are here basically by either a God who put us here and we have to follow rules, and depending on how we go, we'll go to heaven or hell. Or we can take that out and basically say the same thing and say, well, it's just the Big Bang happened and now we're here, and it's just sort of billiard balls and sort of Newtonian kind of physics and kind of all these things happening that are as a result of this thing that happened here. And then there's, evolution and survival of the fittest, which we're just kind of at the mercy of, really. I mean, we can do things a little bit through epigenetics based on our lifestyle, but really it's just the dark, invisible hand that we are completely, just subservient it to. So that's what we are told, which, okay, well, what is, just within that, what is schizophrenia and psychosis? Well, psychosis is just believing things that aren't real or true or actually there. Wait, believing some bearded fellow did something, and now you're here. Okay, that sounds imaginary. And I mean it sounds imaginary because you couldn't conceive of it without imagination. Thus, by definition, it's imaginary. That's all I'm saying. And then the other side of it is the Big Bang. Well, that seems equally as imaginary. All right, well, there's that. But then, okay, I'm a separate individual. That's not actually a thing. That's not ever been proven. All of these things of which our whole world is based on are never been proven, but yet we tell ourselves that we are advanced, we are modern, we are scientific, when we aren't. We're superstitious. We're just lying to ourselves and other people, which there's nothing wrong with believing in any of those things, but be honest. Be upfront and realistic and understand that that's what you're doing. You're choosing to be those things. And don't lie and be like, oh, we're advanced. We use science. We use objective analysis. And we only believe and do things that have been tested and verified and proven and have gone through rigorous examination. That's not true. That's not how our medical establishment works. That's not how the practical fruits of science often work in our world in the most impactful way. And one of the most impactful ways is basically our food and our medicine. Those are some of the most readily available manifestations of this paradigm, and really they're not actually working too well, except only in very small, minute, dehumanized, mechanistic terms. So by definition, those beliefs and assumptions are schizophrenic and psychotic. You look at the definitions of schizophrenia and psychosis, and then you take those beliefs and assumptions, you put them side by side. There's not any difference, really, actually. It's quite interesting. So then there's really no surprise that we feel conflicted, because we believe that somehow, well, I have a spiritual part of me, but then I have like a human part of me that's like animal and old and evolutionary. But then they're somehow like connected, but they're somehow separate. One is better than the other. One is good. One is evil. I'm going to only like work on this part. I'm really working on my like spiritual self. Like now I'm going to work on my physical self. And then, but I have like my emotions, and then I have like my feelings. I have like my intuition. And then I have like my old stuff, and then I have like my new stuff. All of this complexity and division. No wonder we believe that that's actually a real thing. And the thing is that we believe it so strongly that we don't even know we believe it. We've never even questioned it. We're not even aware that it's a thing. We are just like, well, obviously that's true. Everyone, people are getting all Donald Trump on it, Well, I know it, you know it, everyone knows it, so it's true. I don't know if you've seen that meme, but that's basically the logic. And people want to demonize him and say, oh, he's a fucking idiot. But meanwhile, they're doing the same thing. Because if I start getting into this conversation, getting into these beliefs throughout this whole video, most of the time, no one is with me. No one knows what I'm talking about. No one can really relate, or they get upset, or it becomes a whole thing. And this is because this shit is we're not really even seeing it. We have no idea around it. But yet we think we're going to change something, or do something, or be something, or create something different. I don't know about that, because I haven't even addressed the root. We don't even know what the root is. And we don't even know that there is perhaps even the thing as doing those things, because it's all can be rather systematic. And I'm saying this from lots of personal experience, having lots of conversations with people and realizing, oh, this person, is coming on this way, but they're still just hodgepodging a little bit of evolution, a little bit of New Age theory, a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of hodgepodge. They're just putting it together, and that's like, I'm alternative, I'm different, I'm, spiritual, I'm working on myself. And now, to demonstrate how silly all this is, if it hasn't been silly, just listening to it this far, I'm gonna like while I'm talking to you right now, I'm gonna be more spiritual right now. You know, right now I'm really in my spiritual self, but then now I'm gonna be really in my like physical animal nature. Like that's just I'm really in my animal nature right now. But you know that's like kind of bad and weird. So now I'm gonna be like really into my feelings, be really into my like emotions, really into my like just like feeling quality, my intuition, and all this stuff. Now, there's probably people watching it who are like, oh, wow, amazing. That's cool. Like, yeah, I'm doing that too. Like last week, I was just all in my spiritual stuff. The point I'm making is that if you notice not a thing changed, while you were talking, there was just one of me. Just this complete and whole thing didn't change, didn't divide. Part of it didn't like shoot out, it didn't grow another limb. It was still just this one process. Same process. Same process that started the video, basically. And then now. And I went through all those different aspects of myself, but meanwhile, there was just one person, one thing here. And I was talking and using words all at the same time. Wow. What does that really mean then? Well, maybe that all of that shit is imaginary. Maybe it's just different ways of trying to describe the same thing. But maybe we're up at the level of complexity and psychosis and fucking schizophrenia thinking that, oh, well, there's me up here observing it, and then there's all these things over here, and there's all these things over here, and all these things over here, and I'm separate in the world, and this and that and that. Interesting. And then is it really a surprise that we feel sick? Is it really a surprise that we feel clueless and lost? Because there's no connection to really what we are, what this process of life is. So yeah, I wanted to go off on that tangent a little bit just to provide even more context on this whole thing, because that's just really where people are coming from. And if people have not really seen and understood basically everything that I've said in the video, which is really, I've just said a few simple things in a lot of different ways. But really, if people haven't done or gone through this, then I think it's pretty safe to say that what they do and their whatever is probably not going to be very effective. Or it will be only effective within the limited construct that they're operating within. This is applicable for alternative modalities and obviously mainstream modalities as well. Because people, oh my god, it's just getting spammed while I'm making the video. Anyways, this is a good reminder. I think I've said enough. This video is long enough. Anywho, but anyways, hopefully there's been some good things in here. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.